Fae Farm is finally on Nintendo Switch, and it did have a lot of promise. I've got to be honest, I was really looking forward to it, and we got to preview a massive chunk of the game before it came out. With that said though, I wanted to play through and see if it managed to fix some of the things I was a little bit worried about in that preview. In a world where being cozy seems to have become a genre all of its own, is Fae Farm worth snuggling up to? Well, my name's Mark Walker, welcome back to Switch Up. Now, let's find out. As far as storyline, well, the main character stumbles across a note in a bottle inviting them to a magical island. This island, Azoria, is tempting enough for them to ditch their day job, jump on a boat and make their way there. Now unfortunately, a storm hits and you find yourself washed up on the shore, and the townspeople, who seem remarkably blasé about your whole experience, send you off to your own property, which incidentally will become one of many. If you throw several elements of every farming game ever into a big pot, then you're going to get Fae Farm. I don't necessarily mean that as a negative, and it certainly does a few things all of its own, but there aren't a great deal of surprises here. One of the biggest surprises for me was actually the way you move around the world. Your character is able to jump with no silly invisible walls and lots of little bouncy mushrooms to send her backflipping into the sky. Of course, before any of this, you can create your own character, but my daughter got hold of the controls way before me, so I ended up as, well, this one. In comparison to its contemporaries, that fluid movement really does set this apart. From swinging an axe, where it changes animation for each stroke and the final swing being brought down overhead, to the magical abilities you unlock, even down to the way you swim through the water. This is perhaps one of Fae Farm's best design choices. Eventually taking shortcuts becomes second nature to, let's be honest, a load of us who are used to trying to avoid invisible walls and going the way you're supposed to. Now, navigation around the world is helped in a number of ways. Firstly, you've got fast travel points. You'll need to craft a little recipe to unlock them, but it's simple enough. And secondly, any missions, you can select them and have an on-screen waypoint. I would have liked to have had an on-screen minimap, but already the UI, as you can see, is a little cluttered. Your average day involves heading out either to the mines or to build up your farm, balancing your stamina, health and magic, which can be seen up here, and then taking all your hard-earned produce down to the market to sell. I actually like this, being able to sell exactly what you want, when you want, and seeing it out on display. It's a nice little touch. Unfortunately, that display is more animated than most of the characters in the game. They lifelessly stand around, gazing into the distance, waiting for you to come and make a purchase, which actually sounds quite accurate. But therein lies an issue with Fae Farm, and let's be honest, it's not alone there. There are many very good farming simulators and sim life games where the side cast of characters lack a little something in the personality department, but it's an understatement here. I had hoped that we would see a little more. Now, I'm not expecting Disco Elysium levels of storytelling with a farming element, although that would be awesome. Imagine setting up a farm in Martinez, but give me something. Romance has made an appearance, and we didn't get to try this out in the preview build. There are, I believe, 6 different characters that you can romance. How do you do that? Well, it's the usual. Give them a gift, do a little side quest for them, and it'll all be logged in your little romance and relationships journal. Eventually you can get married and you can come home to them and they will be there staring at you lifelessly. It's just to say, I really wish they'd have done a little more as far as giving the characters in this world some personality. You'd have almost as much feedback if you went out into the forest and romanced a tree. Don't do that. Thankfully, there's a lot done right. The farming aspects are very good. There's an automatic system that means that if you go to a tree, it will switch to the axe. Go to a rock, it will switch to the rock. That works well enough unless you're in a dungeon. The reason for this is you'll need to switch to your primary weapon, this staff thing, do a few hits and then switch back, but sometimes it gets a bit glitchy. It will automatically switch from the staff because there's a rock in your vicinity, and yeah, fiddling ensues and running around like a headless chicken. Still, I like the system. I think it's a nice idea. Perhaps a little more refinement, particularly in those areas, would be beneficial. Aside from the farming, which is decent and facilitated with a few magical upgrades, allowing for quick watering or to remove larger areas of land, you can open your build menu wherever you want. This is nice. It means that there's no real limitations around your farm, and you've a large area to customize in any which way. Inside your house, the same applies, except it's a little more interesting again. Your lodgings will have a coziness rating, so as you unlock various paraphernalia, this will increase your stamina, your health, maybe boost your mana. It's actually a very clever way of making something that usually doesn't have any real benefit intrinsic to the game's design. Now, combat only happens from within a dungeon, and I don't really like them. They follow a procedural generation system that means that every different area, of which you'll have to work through around 25, look very similar. Add to that they hold the ingredients you'll need to make the seals to permanently unlock later areas so that you can fast travel when you go inside a dungeon. It sounds complicated, but what it amounts to is several days of doing the same thing to gradually push deeper into the dungeon, to do the same thing, to reach the end to complete a quest. Of course, being hindered by your bedtime. You'll be warned that it's time to go to sleep, and then if you're not back in time, you'll be teleported home. The cardboard cutout crowd who occupies the marketplace, or they tend to leave their stalls, I think it's 10 or 11 PM, and then they'll all head to the pub for a cheeky bevy before completely disappearing, only to respawn the next day. The calendar will show you the different events that take place within the different seasons. This I definitely like. I like seeing when the people's birthdays are so that I can pretend I didn't know and go down into the mines. And I like the end of season festivals, although these could have been a little more overt as they can be completely missed, but perhaps that's the point. Other activities involve creeping around with a little bug net, collecting insects, fishing, which is surprisingly fun actually, cooking, upgrading your backpack, renaming absolutely everything, including your farm, your animals, and yeah, looking after animals. There's an element of breeding here. They'll produce some kind of produce such as eggs or cotton. I was really pleased to see online multiplayer. Now once you've signed up for an account, there are no lobbies. You'll have to give friends a code or host your own lobby and then give them a code, and then you'll all be able to team up online. Strangely, you have to create a brand new character for this. You can't actually carry on with your existing one, which is a stupid idea, so bear that in mind. Overall, Fae Farm is charming, it's enjoyable. Have I been overly critical about the slightly lifeless characters in the world? Perhaps. It does tick almost every box in a farming sim genre, and it does a few things that they don't. If the game sees a lot of support after launch, I think we could see a few of these issues resolved, but for me right now, I would give gameplay 16 out of 20, and the controls, which by the way can be a bit fiddly when you're planting crops, they score 15 out of 20. Visually, I think Fae Farm's a nice looking game. It has a varied colour palette with almost a pastel washed out look combined with some oversaturated elements. It's the animations which really set it apart. They're very well done, nice and fluid, and give the whole thing a sense of momentum. The sound and audio is equally pleasing. I love that they didn't just go for a standard looping track. In fact, there are several times when there's no music at all and it's just the sound of the ambient environment. When there is music, it's not offensive, it's enjoyable, and it simply enhances what's on screen. Performance-wise, well, we're looking at 30 frames per second most of the time, but it's generally quite well optimized, particularly in the resolution, providing a reasonable image. Load times are very short, which is nice, and the text size is reasonable. It can all just get a little bit cluttered on screen, but there may be some options to turn everything off. Visuals and performance score 16 out of 20. Sound and audio also scores 16 out of 20. Fae Farm will set you back $49.99 or your regional equivalent, and strangely, I think it's a little bit cheaper for the base game on the PC. Oh well, the physical's also 40 quid here in Argos, so you can always pick up that, and it does offer a decent bit of value, and if you've got a few of you for the online, I'd say it's far better. With that said though, 50 quid if you're buying a digital copy, that's premium territory. In fact, that's first party territory. Personally, I'd be looking for a little sale on this one before I picked it up. There's tons to do. You could spend 100 hours quite happily, but as far as working through the story, well, you're looking at around 30 to 40 hours. It just gets a little bit repetitive. The whole thing fits into a nice 1.7 gigabyte download. I give value 15 out of 20. So the final form of Fae Farm will suit fans, but I think for most they'll be waiting for a sale. It's a fun game, but it could have done a little more to set itself apart. It gets a very good switch up score of 78%. Let me know in the comments, is this one you've been playing? Have you picked it up? I cannot tear my daughter away from it, so it's obviously doing something right. And yeah, just a thanks to all of you that enjoy the content. For all things Switch all the time, keep it Switch up. Cheers guys, see ya!